I, 28F, have been living with my boyfriend Craig, 31M, for the past 3 years. This story involves my stepbrother Jake, 35M, his wife Candace, 33F, and their kids Lucas, 7M, and Emma, 4F. My parents divorced when I was 10, and my dad married Jake's mom Lisa when I was 15. Jake was 22 and already in college when our parents got married. Our blended family situation was never smooth. Jake resented his mom's remarriage and saw me as the kid who invaded his family's space. He'd avoid coming home during college breaks if he knew I was there. When he did come home, he'd make snide comments about how his mom tried replacing him with a new kid. Lisa always defended him, saying he just needed time to adjust. My dad tried to keep peace but mostly stayed out of it. I spent my teenage years walking on eggshells around Jake. If I used the family computer when he wanted it, he'd complain to Lisa. If I ate the last of something in the fridge, he'd make a huge deal about it. He even got mad when I got better grades than he did in high school, saying I was trying to show him up. Looking back, he was incredibly immature for someone in his 20s. Jake met Candace during his final year of college. She was sweet and tried to include me in their conversations when she visited. But Jake would always find ways to exclude me. When they got married 8 years ago, I wasn't invited to the wedding. Jake told Lisa it was a small ceremony with limited space, but Facebook photos showed it was quite large. It hurt, but I was used to his behavior by then. Everything changed when Lucas was born. Suddenly Jake started acting nice to me. He invited me to Lucas's baptism, sent me birthday cards, and asked about my life. I was suspicious at first, but Lisa was so happy about us getting along that I tried to be open-minded. When Jake asked if I could watch Lucas one Saturday night so he and Candace could have a date night, I agreed. Lucas was a sweet baby, and I thought maybe this was Jake's way of building a relationship with me. The babysitting started small, just a few hours on weekends. Jake and Candace would bring Lucas over with everything he needed and pick him up on time. They'd thank me with small gifts or treat me to coffee. When Emma was born 3 years later, I was even invited to the hospital. I really thought Jake had changed. But things started shifting about 2 years ago. Jake got transferred to a new department at his accounting firm and Candace returned to teaching full-time. The babysitting requests became more frequent. Jake would call me at 7 a.m. asking if I could watch the kids because their regular sitter canceled. He'd text at lunch saying Candace had a last-minute staff meeting and could I pick up Lucas from school. Since I work from home as a content writer with flexible hours, he assumed I was always available. I tried to be understanding at first. Childcare is expensive, and they both had demanding jobs. But Jake started taking advantage. He dropped the kids off without proper notice, saying things like, "Oh, I told Lisa to tell you," or "I texted you last night." He hadn't. He promised to pick them up by 6 p.m. but wouldn't show up until 9 p.m., always with excuses about traffic or work emergencies. Craig was incredibly patient initially. He likes kids and would often help entertain Lucas and Emma when I had deadlines. But even he started getting frustrated. Our one-bedroom apartment isn't set up for children. The kids would mess up his work documents, interrupt his video calls, and leave toys everywhere. We couldn't have adult conversations or watch regular TV when they were around. 6 months ago, Jake got a promotion at work. He started asking me to watch the kids almost every day. He claimed Candace's teaching schedule had changed and they couldn't afford full-time daycare. He'd drop them off at 8 a.m. and sometimes wouldn't pick them up until 9 p.m. My work suffered because I couldn't focus with 2 energetic kids demanding attention. I missed deadlines and lost a regular client. I tried talking to Jake about setting boundaries. I suggested specific days and times that worked for my schedule. I asked for advance notice and firm pickup times. I even offered to help them find affordable daycare options. But Jake would guilt-trip me every time. He'd say things like I thought we were finally becoming family or remember how I included you in Lucas's life when I didn't have to. When I suggested getting paid for regular babysitting, he exploded, saying I was trying to profit off family and that I owed him for all the times he'd been nice to me. Last month, after missing another work deadline, I finally put my foot down. I told Jake I couldn't watch the kids anymore unless it was a genuine emergency with at least 24 hours notice. He got really angry, calling me selfish and ungrateful. He brought up how he'd accepted me into his family and how I was betraying that acceptance. Candace called me crying, saying they couldn't afford daycare and their work schedules were impossible to manage. I felt bad but stayed firm. Craig supported my decision, saying we needed to prioritize our own life and careers. Things seemed okay for a week. Jake stopped talking to me, but that wasn't unusual when he didn't get his way. Then last Tuesday, everything exploded. At 2 a.m., Jake showed up at our apartment completely drunk. He started banging on our door and screaming about how I ruined his life. He was yelling that everything was my fault and that I'd pay for what I'd done. Craig called the police while I tried to calm Jake down through the door, but he left before they arrived. The next morning, Candace called me hysterical. Through her sobs, she revealed that Jake hadn't been working late all those times. He was having an affair with his co-worker Sarah, yes, same name as me. He'd been using me as a cover, telling Candace he was dropping the kids at my place while working late, but actually meeting his girlfriend. Some days he wasn't even taking the kids to me at all, he was taking them to his girlfriend's house and telling Candace they were with me. The truth came out because his co-worker's husband found their messages and contacted Candace. Jake had been sleeping with this woman for 8 months, using my babysitting as his alibi. He'd even created fake texts to show Candace, making it look like he'd arranged childcare with me. Candace filed for divorce immediately. Now Jake is blaming me for everything. He says if I hadn't stopped babysitting, his affair wouldn't have been exposed. He's been sending threatening messages to me and Craig. Yesterday he showed up at my office building and started yelling about how I destroyed his family. Security had to escort him out. My boss was understanding but warned me about workplace safety. We're planning to file for a restraining order tomorrow. My stepmom Lisa is furious with me, saying I should have just continued babysitting to help Jake keep his family together. She says I'm selfish for prioritizing my living in sin relationship with Craig over Jake's marriage. My dad stays quiet, not wanting to upset his wife. Craig wants to move to a different city, but I feel guilty about disrupting our lives because of Jake's actions. Am I wrong for refusing to babysit and inadvertently exposing Jake's affair? Should I have just continued helping them? Update 1: Things have gotten much worse since my last post. After we filed the restraining order against Jake, he started finding new ways to harass us. Instead of contacting us directly, he's now using our family members, especially our parents, to get to us. Jake convinced my stepmom Lisa that I'm lying about everything just to ruin his marriage. He told her that I made up the affair story because I was jealous of his successful marriage and family life. According to him, I'm bitter about being unmarried and living with my boyfriend, so I created drama to break up his family. Lisa believed him completely and has been calling me daily, sometimes multiple times a day. Her calls always start with crying about how I destroyed her son's perfect life. She brings up how Jake graciously accepted me into the family and how I repaid his kindness with betrayal. When I try to explain my side, she talks over me, saying I'm just making excuses. She even called Craig's parents to tell them what a horrible person I am and how I'm ruining families. Thankfully, Craig's parents know Jake's history of manipulation and didn't believe her. Last week, things escalated when Lisa showed up at our apartment unannounced with Lucas and Emma. She tried forcing her way in, saying Jake needed me to watch the kids while he was sorting things out with Candace. The kids were crying and confused. Emma kept asking why I didn't want to play with them anymore. It broke my heart, but I had to close the door. Craig called the police, but Lisa left with the kids before they arrived. After that incident, we installed security cameras at our front door. They've already caught Jake driving by our apartment late at night 3 times this week. We reported these violations of the restraining order to the police, but they say they can't do much unless he actually approaches us. The biggest shock came when Candace contacted me privately. She had discovered something disturbing while going through their financial records. Jake had been stealing money from their joint accounts to fund his affair. He'd been taking large sums out regularly, sometimes thousands of dollars at a time. When Candace would question the withdrawals, he'd claim they were for the kids' activities or household expenses. Candace found credit card statements showing hotel bookings and expensive restaurant bills from times when Jake claimed the kids were with me. He'd been taking the kids and his girlfriend to expensive places, theme parks, water parks, fancy restaurants, while telling Candace they were spending time at my apartment. He even booked a weekend trip to Disney World, telling Candace the kids were staying with me for a special aunt weekend. The betrayal gets even worse. Jake's girlfriend's husband reached out to me through Facebook. He shared screenshots of conversations between Jake and his wife dating back months. In these messages, Jake regularly complained about me, calling me ungrateful and stupid. He told his girlfriend that he only pretended to accept me as family so he could use me for free childcare. There were detailed messages planning their meetups while the kids were supposedly with me. These revelations made Lisa finally question Jake's story, but instead of apologizing, she's now saying we need to keep this quiet to protect the family's reputation. She's been calling my relatives, asking them not to discuss this situation with anyone outside the family. Craig and I had to change our phone numbers because Jake kept calling from different numbers. Sometimes he'd call crying, saying he was sorry and needed help. Other times he'd scream threats and blame me for ruining his life. He even tried calling from payphones to avoid being blocked. Jake's harassment extended to our jobs too. He found Craig's work email and started sending messages to his colleagues, claiming Craig was abusive and unstable. He called Craig's boss saying Craig was stealing from the company. Thankfully, Craig has worked there for years and his boss didn't believe these accusations, but it was still stressful and embarrassing. The hardest part of all this is seeing how it affects Lucas and Emma. Candace says Lucas has started acting out at school, getting into fights and refusing to do his work. He told his teacher he hates me because I made his daddy leave. Emma's been having nightmares and asking why she can't visit my house anymore. I tried explaining things in a child-friendly way through Candace, but they're too young to understand. Our landlord has been understanding and installed additional security cameras after Jake was spotted lurking around our building late at night. Other tenants have reported seeing him in the parking lot, sitting in his car for hours. We're seriously considering moving to a different neighborhood or even a different city. Craig's job is fully remote now due to COVID, and I can write from anywhere. We just need to get away from this toxic situation. Some of our mutual family friends have taken Jake's side, saying I should have just kept babysitting to keep the peace. They say I knew Jake had issues and should have been more understanding. A few have even suggested that I might have encouraged the affair by refusing to babysit, giving Jake more free time with his coworker. I'm trying to stay strong, but this constant stress is affecting my health. I've lost weight from not eating properly and I'm having trouble sleeping. Craig suggests therapy, but right now we're focused on saving money for a potential move. I just want this nightmare to end. Did I make things worse by getting the restraining order? Should I have handled this differently? Update 2: The situation with Jake has completely spiraled out of control. His life is falling apart, but he's still trying to drag everyone down with him. The biggest shock came last week when Jake was fired from his accounting firm. Not only was he having an affair with his coworker, but they discovered he'd been falsifying expense reports to fund their dates and trips. His girlfriend Sarah dumped him immediately after he lost his job. Turns out she was only interested in him while he was spending money on her. She confessed everything to their company's HR department to save her own job, providing details about how Jake had been manipulating the expense system for months. The company is pressing charges for fraud. Apparently he stole over $50,000 through fake client meetings and inflated expense claims. Candace's divorce proceedings revealed even more shocking details. Jake had opened secret credit cards in both their names, maxing them out on hotels and gifts for his girlfriend. He'd been forging Candace's signature on financial documents and hiding bank statements. The judge granted Candace full custody of the kids after she presented evidence of his unstable behavior, financial fraud, and the police reports from his violations of our restraining order. The biggest revelation came from my dad, who finally broke his silence. He called me privately and admitted that Jake has a history of manipulative behavior that goes back years. In college, Jake had befriended a guy named Mike specifically to get close to Mike's sister Jenny, who was a top student. He convinced Jenny to tutor him for free, claiming he couldn't afford to pay her because he was helping his single mom with bills. Meanwhile, he was sleeping with Jenny's roommate and spending money on expensive dates with her. When Jenny discovered the truth and confronted him, Jake turned their entire friend group against her, claiming she had tried to seduce him and was lying out of spite. Dad also revealed that before marrying Candace, Jake had been engaged to another woman. He broke off that engagement after cheating with someone from his gym, but managed to convince everyone that his ex-fiancée had been the unfaithful one. Dad said he wanted to warn Candace before their wedding, but Lisa convinced him not to interfere. Last night, everything came to a head when Jake showed up at our parents' house completely drunk. He demanded they cut me out of their lives and transfer their house into his name since he needed it more than I did. When they refused, he went into a rage, breaking windows, throwing furniture, and punching holes in the walls. The police were called and Jake spent the night in jail. My stepmom Lisa finally saw Jake's true colors during this incident. She called me crying, apologizing for not believing me and for enabling his behavior all these years. She admitted that she'd always known Jake had issues but thought if she loved him enough and protected him from consequences, he would change. Now she's devastated, realizing her protection only made him worse. Craig and I are moving next week. We found a nice apartment in a secure building 2 hours away from here. It's in a gated community with 24-hour security, and the rent is actually cheaper than our current place. Craig got a better job offer there too, with a significant pay raise. The only downside is being farther from my dad, but he understands and supports our decision. Jake's harassment has taken a darker turn since he lost his job. He's been posting about us on social media, making wild accusations and threats. He even created fake profiles pretending to be old girlfriends of Craig's, claiming Craig was abusive. We've reported everything to the police and our lawyer, documenting each incident. Candace reached out to warn me that Jake's been asking their mutual friends about guns. She overheard him talking about making me pay for ruining his life. We've added extra security measures at our current place for our remaining time here, and our new apartment complex knows not to give out any information about us. The saddest part is how this is affecting Lucas and Emma. Lucas has started therapy to deal with his anger issues, and his therapist suggested limiting contact with Jake until he gets help. Emma still doesn't understand why her daddy is so angry all the time. She had a breakdown at school last week when another kid mentioned having 2 houses because of divorce. At this point, I'm just counting down the days until we can move. We haven't told anyone except my dad our new address, and we plan to keep it that way. Some family members think I'm overreacting by moving away, but after everything that's happened, I'm not taking any chances with our safety. Update 3: Life has finally settled into a peaceful rhythm in our new city. The constant fear and anxiety of looking over our shoulders is gone. Our new apartment complex has amazing security, and not having to worry about Jake showing up unexpectedly has been a huge relief. Unfortunately, Jake violated the restraining order twice more before facing serious consequences. The first time, he followed my dad after a family dinner, thinking Dad would lead him to our new address. Dad noticed him and called the police. The second time, he showed up at Craig's new workplace, causing a scene in the lobby. Security footage from both incidents helped build a stronger case against him. Jake is now facing jail time for multiple offenses: the fraud charges from his company, violating the restraining order, and making criminal threats. His lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the evidence was too overwhelming. He's looking at 2 to 3 years minimum. Candace and the kids have made impressive progress. She used her teaching background to start an online tutoring business, which is doing really well. She moved to a smaller house, but it's closer to her parents who help with childcare. Lucas is responding well to therapy, his anger issues have improved, and he's doing better in school. Emma has adjusted surprisingly well to their new routine, though she still asks about Jake sometimes. We found a safe way to maintain a relationship with the kids through video calls. Candace supervises these calls, and we never discuss Jake or anything upsetting. It's not the same as having them visit, but it's safer for everyone. Lucas loves showing me his school projects, and Emma always wants to give a virtual tour of her redecorated room. My stepmom Lisa started therapy to deal with her guilt about enabling Jake all these years. She admitted to my dad that she ignored many red flags in Jake's behavior since childhood, always making excuses for him. She's working on accepting that Jake's choices are his own and not her fault. Dad says she's become much more assertive and has stopped trying to fix everything for Jake. Dad visits us monthly, always making sure to take different routes and check he's not being followed. He's become closer to Craig, often going fishing together when he visits. This whole situation actually strengthened my relationship with Dad. He finally stopped trying to keep peace at my expense. Craig and I are planning our wedding, but keeping it small and private. We'll have it at an undisclosed location, with only our closest family members who we trust completely. Lisa offered to help with the planning, but understood when we politely declined. We can't risk Jake finding out any details. Some extended family members still send messages through Dad, saying I should forgive Jake since he's family and facing jail time. An aunt even suggested I write a letter to the judge asking for leniency. I've blocked anyone who tries to guilt me about this. Jake made his choices, and he needs to face the consequences. Craig's company is doing well, and I've rebuilt my client base in our new city. We're thinking about buying a house next year, something we never felt secure enough to consider before. Our new neighbors are friendly but respect our privacy, and we've made some good friends who know nothing about our past drama. Looking back, I don't regret refusing to babysit or getting the restraining order. Sometimes the hardest decisions are the right ones. Going no contact with Jake was necessary for our safety and peace of mind. I've learned that sharing DNA or growing up in the same house doesn't obligate you to accept abuse or manipulation. Sometimes cutting toxic people out completely is the only way to move forward, even if they're family.